the whole concept, the whole notion of peace that I've been very attracted to and drawn to just in this past year as I see the world erupting rather haphazardly all over. And realizing that music, in a way, can contribute to bringing about a kind of understanding. It's a universal language, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. And so I decided that I would try to focus my work in helping to bring about some kind of peace or harmony. And that I also realized that inner peace is really how it all begins. That we can have global peace, but we can only be as peacemakers as much peace as we have within ourselves, which I think is what the music can reach that much greater. So that's kind of where I'm focusing my work right now, and I'm delighted that you could all be here and share it.
The word peace has an anemic sound. Your interpretation of peace makes it sound like oatmeal, makes it sound like a patient etherized upon a table. No wonder war is so much more popular. War is a word with hair on its chest. War celebrates violence, anger. Peace has been misunderstood. Because one nation is not at war with another does not mean that those nations are at peace. Because you are not feuding with your neighbor does not mean that you and your neighbor are at peace. Because your wife is not throwing crockery at you does not mean that there is peace in your family. Because you are not jumping off a bridge does not mean that there is peace within yourself. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is not negative. Peace is not passive. Peace is positive, active, expansionist. Peace is joy. Peace is triumph. Peace is love. And love is not passive. You have been searching for peace through many, many years, many, many lifetimes, searching for peace at all levels. And we need to tell you, to perhaps remind you, that the lesson of the world, of the human life, is that one is all and all are one. That around you, in your daily life, everything that you see, everything that you perceive, is a lesson, is an illustration of oneness. If you have the eyes to see and the heart to receive, there is no real difference between the conduct of nations and the conduct of human beings as individuals and the conduct of you as one. All are illustrations of the loss of understanding of the word, of the concept, love. All are illustrations of the duality, the black and the white, the love and the fear. Everything that you see, every task that you do, every interaction with every other human being, everything that you read in the newspapers, everything that you see on television, all one story, and finally, one lesson. You are not alone. You are connected to every other human being. You are connected to God. You are connected to earth. You are connected to the universe. And it is the journey of humankind to finally detect that interconnection, to realize it, and to act upon it as though it was real, though invisible to the eyes, inaudible to the ears, indecipherable to the mind. You are searching for yourselves in your interaction with each other. What your country does is what you are doing. What your country does illustrates the struggle that is ultimately the struggle within. You, citizens of various nations, split and sundered by hatred, by jealousy, by greed, broken down into a piece here and a parcel there, breaking and artificially separating human beings, labeling them Russian and German and English and French and African and Chinese and American and Mexican and Spanish. How are they to be so divided? It's not on the basis of the color of skin. It is not on any visible basis. I am like you because we have the same belief system, because we have the same color skin, because our antecedents are the same. The reasons are many and varied, but the illustration is of the fracturing, the separating of the oneness into the appearance of many. The flow of humankind is toward oneness, beginning on this earth as one, united, and then gradually as history progressed, scattering and fragmenting into 100 and 1,000 and 1,000 subcategories, and then beginning to find their way back together. That is the completion of the journey, and it is not for this lifetime. It is the completion of the human journey, when the one that appeared to become the many becomes again the one. In this century of human life, if you stand back in some objectivity and take a look at the flow of history, you will note several characteristics about roughly the last 100 years or so. You will note that events of great magnitude multiply rapidly, that there has been more history crammed into the last 100 years than into the 1,000 years previous. More events. You will note also the beginnings of a sense of universal identification. The beginnings of tentative attempts to reach out hands and clasp the hands across the sea. The beginnings. Institutions created out of fear and mutual suspicion, but nonetheless means to an end. The League of Nations, the United Nations, international efforts toward amity that have begun in this century. Now, previous to that, treaties of peace, understandings of peace among nations were exclusively the province of the rulers and exclusively done out of self-interest. That was the stimulus now. But the stimulus has bred a new kind of thinking, a new kind of awareness, the awareness of the necessity of peace, the facing the stark alternative. Now, throughout human history, there have been wars of great violence and of great duration. Wars that have killed hundreds of thousands of people, wars that have gone on decades and even centuries. The human race, one may fairly say, has always been at war. Always killing for gain, for ideal, for power. That is the history of humankind. And not simply male history. Yes, you may look at the rulers and say, well, they were all male and only men would have created such a reality. Not so. Not so. It is a human fallibility. The human struggle that you are all a part of today and have always been a part of, life beyond life beyond life. And now as the time of knitting comes, the time of the revelation, of the evolution, of the transformation, now a light dawns that has not previously been seen. But the presence of that light makes the rest of the sky seem darker. Yes, we've always said fear is illusion. But it's an illusion that can kill you. It's an illusion that has power while so many believe in it. And in the past 100 years, there has been an acceleration of the reign of darkness and the reign of fear. They say it's always darkest before the dawn. So it is. Matters are always at their most critical before breakthrough. Your own pain in your transformation is at its greatest height before you leap to a new level. The pressure has been steadily increasing, creating circumstances that provoked harsh but clear alternatives, death or life. In all of those wars throughout human history, there was never the threat of the annihilation of the race. And who cared if all of those bad guys got killed? The race was expanding, multiplying, fruitful, filling the earth. What's a few 100,000 here or there? Because the cause is holy. Always, on every side. But then events began to converge in this century, the final century of the millennia that have been devoted to humankind's focus on the ego mind, releasing the freedom of the will, while the spirit remained inert and ignored. And so, as you have grown intellectually as a race, mastering the physical universe to the best of your present ability, driving the mind to do tasks previously unheard of, the enormous complexity of the life of the average American would dumbfound the most sophisticated member of any previous society. The decisions, the countless rapid-fire decisions that must be made every day, the great speed with which you travel, the great mobility, the shrinking of the earth, the enormous amount of input as the accretion of knowledge fills every computer and every mind with a dizzying array of choices. A world and a race grown increasingly sophisticated and complex, requiring minds tuned to the highest to survive in this industrialized part of the world. And the stakes of war grew greater. The Great War, which now significantly is referred to only as World War I, killed thousands upon thousands of people, killed them in trenches, killed them hand to hand, killed them with fairly primitive bombs and hand grenades, killed slowly over years of time, but virtually destroyed a generation. The Second World War, only 21 years later, was on an entirely different scale, beginning immediately with blitzkrieg, with sneak attacks, with air power, with civilian bombing, with rocket bombs, finally with jet planes, and finally with the atomic bomb, wherein the building block of the physical universe is fractured. Well, isn't that a lesson? And the stakes grew insupportable. And the nations that controlled the bomb created a balance of terror. Don't step over this line, or we will kill everybody. Crisis that must come before breakthrough. And now in this day, and in this time, what is changing so that the future will not be a repetition of the past, and so that the future will not mean the destruction of humanity? What is the difference in human beings? The difference is that the energy of the universe has changed, is changing. The difference is that the long night is over. But it is that moment before dawn when all seems dark. There are many who speak only of doom, who warn you to gather up your supplies, buy guns, and take to the hills, for the twilight of civilization is upon you, and the end of the world is nigh. There are those who say war is at hand, destruction is at hand, all is collapsing. Are those people wrong? Not entirely. Certainly not from their point of view. It is the old illustration of the glass being half empty or half full. It's all a matter of perspective. If you are so fully engaged in the world of darkness and in the world of fear, if you have invested all of your belief in things as they are, then you will not notice that glimmer of light. And the energy, the healing, transforming energy that is changing lives, that is changing reality under your feet and around you, will only be disruptive in its effect upon you if you are determined to stay where you are, to make of your mind a God, to persist in the blind folly of greed, of envy, of patriotism, of the need to prove your power and thump your chest and shout the cry of war. Because it is not just war among nations that we are talking about. Too often, those who wish peace on earth bring their focus exclusively or primarily to the struggle, the ongoing struggle among warring nations. Each one trying to be number one. Each one wanting a little more of what you have. But that's the outer lesson. That reality is a reflection of every citizen that makes up every country. Even those who think themselves devoted to peace wage peace as if it was war. Demand. Shout. Fight for peace. Kill for peace. But we've said that peace isn't passive, that peace is expansive. But we've said that peace is joy, not anger. Anger will never beget peace. Self-righteousness will never beget peace, but only add to the polarity, to the anger, to the divisiveness. So what do? Do you leave the world to the warmongers? No, you recognize what is a verity, but is yet little practiced, that peace begins at home, that peace begins within. That you are, all of you, involved in a personal process that will inevitably lead to personal peace, and therefore, ultimately, to universal peace. So what about in the meantime? Work for peace. As you work for peace within yourself, accepting the challenges that your life structure offers you, accepting, understanding, and growing from the lessons that are taught you from all of the teachers that are a part of your life, as you grow within, as you learn to forgive yourself and others, accompany that inner growth with its reflection in how you behave, how you respond in your family. You are learning to accept love for yourself. You're learning that you have the power to create a reality that brings you love, that brings you joy, that brings you satisfaction. And as you expand another step, you share that growing light with those around you. You heal relationships. You do not turn away in anger or in sorrow from those who disappoint you, for they are also disappointing themselves. For they are a part of you, and your heart opens to them as you see your own blindness in their sightless eyes. Your perspective changes without your having to focus on that. Your perspective changes because you are growing and you are changing, and you begin to see things differently. And the light within you does begin to reflect within your family and in your circle of friends and in your love relationships and at your work. Many of you in this period of time change relationships, change your work, change your life, Because as you see yourself more clearly and fall more in love with yourself, you wish to provide the best circumstances, the highest relationships. Many things fall away from you. You become you, and not this disguise and that disguise and this dependency and that dependency. You're not living your life for mother or for dad or for your wife or for your husband or for your children. You're living your life for you because that's what it's given to you for. For you to live, for you to grow, for you to find out why you're being blocked from joy. Work, accept the challenges to release those blocks and expand. Finding along the way that inwardness, that attention that you are paying to yourself is not selfish, does not deprive others. That in fact, it was before that you were depriving others, where you did things apparently out of love, but full of hesitation. And you realize that much of what you had done in relationships was manipulation. Not because you're some evil character, but because you were afraid. And you needed to protect yourself. And you knew from bitter, grim experience that if you truly opened your heart, if you truly communicated what was in your being, if you shared yourself, that the risk was too great, not safe. And so you closed. And now, all is changed. You are a flower growing. Your blossoms expanding. Because as you love yourself, you love others. If you do not love yourself, you cannot love others. If you cannot love others and yourself, you cannot have peace. And your family cannot have peace. And your neighborhood, and your city, and your state, and your nation, and your race cannot have peace. It begins with you, and you know, every time you say that to someone, whether it's to collect for a charity or in terms of peace, they say, well, great, I know that's true, but after all, I'm one among billions of human beings. And it's not much of an incentive to add my tiny widow's mite until you realize that you are not one among billions, that you are the one, that there is only you in all of your forms, in all of your moods, in all of your colors, in all of your shapes, and that the risk for love that you take, the opening, accepting the vulnerability, because you can only prove that there is no vulnerability, there is no risk, there is no gamble by taking the risk and taking the gamble and choosing to be vulnerable and finding out that it is in vulnerability, so-called, that you find your strength, your wholeness, that the risk was never a risk, only in your fears. And as you prove it to yourself and to your lover and to your family and to all of the others that touch you and you touch, you, the one, are creating enormous change. Because when you deal with people out of love, without all that self-protection, without a hidden agenda, without thinking, if I treat this person this way, I'm likely to get this. That all the change in the world has been created by you. that as every cell in the human organism awakens, it sheds its light on all of the others. And peace emanates from you like the ripples in a pond. You have been asleep, having nightmares. And you know about nightmares. What happens in nightmares? Impossible things happen in nightmares. You're attacked by beasts that never roamed the earth, by giants. You fall from great heights. The terrors within, magnified, falsified. And you find that that world that was such a bad dream doesn't contain all those monsters. That the monster was always you. Your fear, your anger, your jealousy, your sense of, I don't get enough, everybody else gets everything. And everything is there for you. The table has been laid for you. The trees shelter gifts given to you. And all you have to do is accept. Accept the gift. Acceptance of something that's been sitting there for you. The promise fulfilled. Whose promise? The Prince of Peace, whose story exemplified peace. How do you get to peace? By retiring to a lonely hilltop and contemplating your navel? Never. Peace is active. Peace faces the challenge of temptations, of earthly power, of the ability to manipulate, to use the power for personal gain. Look at the story of Jesus the Christ, the Prince of Peace, the fountain of love. It is your story. You are all Christ. You are all experiencing the stations of the cross in this life of transformation. The gift was the gift of peace, and you turned it down again and again. Why? Because you believed in your illusions. You believed in earthly power, the power of princes. You believed only in one part of your reality. And so we do not say, you holy people, you are all Christ, abstain from the world, it's too dirty for you. Live in the world. Grasp the world. Change the world. You are the world. You are of the earth. And by accepting the gift of the Christ, the transformation into wholeness, the ending of the duality, as you complete yourself, as you find your balance, then you will have peace. And peace is going to be the greatest adventure that humanity has ever had. Far more exciting, more challenging than war ever was. And that's what you need to understand, and that is the truth that you need to transfer. Because people aren't ever going to go running to the banner of peace as long as it sounds boring. And to young people with the sap of life boiling within them, Young males, particularly, with their juices bubbling, like the idea of war. They don't know what to do with themselves with all that energy. And so they want to fight. And when the human race was young, it's all you wanted to do, fight, fight, fight. Without sex and war, you wouldn't have anything to do. Convey to others the excitement of peace, the challenge of peace. You've never experienced it. You are beginning to now in your own life. You are beginning to create relationships, usually first with friends, because the sexual issues are so difficult to deal with that the love relationship usually follows along. But you're creating relationships first with friends that are transcendent relationships. You have never in your life or in your other lives been as trusting, as honest, as open, as vulnerable as you are with your dearest friends now. And that's because you are recognizing there isn't a threat here, because I'm you and you're me. And this is the perspective that I have, and my experience, and how I felt. And the other one says, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Because I've gone through this, and I experienced this. And human by human, cell by cell, you come alive and you come awake and you begin to recognize that you are all one. And you look around you when you are no longer concerned with coveting your neighbor's wife, when you are no longer concerned with getting ahead of the Joneses, when you are no longer worried about being shot on the freeway, when you are no longer terrorized by disaster to the right and to the left and surrounding you, then you will see the tremendously exciting challenges that await you as an individual and that await you as a race. The mysteries that surround you, the mysteries that fill you, opening over and over, dimension after dimension of understanding, growing from that one to the many, to the recognition of the one in the many, and then gradually expanding your vision and your understanding, your search and your triumph into the vast, multidimensional webwork of life that is God. And you will explore space and have adventures, bringing with you your message, not the old message of earth, give us your gold and let us rape your women, but a message of light, of understanding, of helping, of guidance. Now, that is the crux of where you're heading. The next chapter, the human being as guide for others who are struggling their way through duality, through fear, through illusion. Each hand reaching out to help the other, the brother, the sister, the race struggling from the slime into the sun. Each of you a part of that in the lives that flow from this life. This time you'll be the aliens, the guides, the flying saucers, the bringers of understanding, the lighters of the candle. Peace is just so much more exciting than war. There's no future in war, whether it's within yourself or among nations. And just as in your own life, in this life, the accumulation of pain and frustration from this life and all of the other lives that have fed into it finally brought you individually to a point of frustration. in which the threat of continuing the way you were was greater than the threat of change. And that's where the human race is. And the nuclear energy, the fountainhead of fear, is the precipitating factor here. That is the load of frustration built to the bursting point. The fear that cannot be borne any longer. The imminence of extinction. You do not recognize what a toll that takes on each and every one of you. The subconscious, usually, awareness that your life can be snuffed out without warning at any time. Through the machinations of people you don't know, whose language you don't speak, and through the machinations of your own alleged leaders. Your leaders do not, in fact, represent you any longer. True, the enlightenment, the transformation as it grows and as it spreads, is bringing light into every quarter. But those the most entrenched at this point in human transformation are those that do not represent you because they are not of your energy. They are still captured by the old lies, the old terrors, the old paranoia, the distrust of all of the other visions of self, those foreigners. And so there is a task for each and every one of you. You are the pioneers. You have chosen to be first, to inspire by example, to lead in unison. You have work to do. The focus has been the work within. The focus has been your own pain and your own blockage. And finally, your patient, long-suffering willingness to go through it, work it out. And now, since the harmonic convergence, the beginnings of greater clarity, the shifting of emphasis from death to birth, the growing into your sense of wholeness, your awareness of wholeness. It's not that you're putting the finishing touches on yourselves. There's lots of work to do, but it's not going to be so painful. It's going to be more triumphant. It's going to be more fun. Because the hardest part is over. And so now your focus can begin to shift outward. Right now, there's a candle lit in a world of darkness. Earth and humanity will pass into the next stage of development. Will finally become whole. But the quality of the passage is up to you. Give yourselves to a cause that is everyone's cause. To a peace that is not passive, but active, that is expansive, that is the reflection of your own expanding selves. A peace of joy. And work on it, not just in meditation, not just in good thoughts, not just in hugs between friends, but on the stage that is there. Using your influence in the human sense. Using your material wealth. Whatever it is. Using your vote. Using your voice. More than any other group of human beings since history began, you can speak with one voice. Not monolithically, but because the vision of wholeness belongs to all of you. Because for the first time, you are recognizing that you are one. Brushing aside illusion, you see truth, and there is but one truth. And you all see it, and you all feel it, and you can all work for it. Don't think that you can sit back for the rest of the trip. The commitment that you have made to yourself and to your own healing is a commitment to every other individual in the world. There is great work to be done. But don't think of old models. Don't think of the old form of pressure groups and clubs and secret insignias and all of the paraphernalia of power wielding. You have more power than any human being has ever had since Christ. Enormous power to heal. Enormous power to transform. Psychically, spiritually, but also using the fact that in your wholeness, you've teamed up with your spirit, with the knowledge that is wisdom. And it has given you greater understanding, greater perspective. And as you begin to express your true power, the world will change. You are a new race. You are not Homo sapiens. You are the triune human beings, the founders of a new reality. Recognize, understand, expand upon your own sense of personal power, because power is not a bad word or a bad concept. When power is fed by faith, by enlightenment, by wisdom, and by truth, it can bring only good, because it's fed only by love. Others, not a part of this journey, hearing these words, would say, a demagogue, trying to create some kind of a political movement. Or, depending on who's listening, Antichrist. Using the words of God, but the heart of the devil. Well, the enlightenment that you're each feeling, yet even in the midst of confusion, it's not the same as it was. You recognize that. You see things a bit better. You may not know exactly where you're going, but that's good, because you won't try to direct yourself in the wrong direction. You're learning to trust. You're learning to recognize that things have been grim and things have been dark, but yet it works out. And progress takes place. And so for all of you, we say to you, your future is the future of the human race. In your hands is the power to create. You are gods in training. And you're going to have plenty of opportunity to practice and to prove to yourselves, to your friends, and to the world that simple truth that is being illustrated all around you every day in every way. All are one, and one is all. Now, before there is some more music from our brother, we would entertain any questions that you may have.
Louis and I, who's sitting next to me here, have been noticing an increased amount of friction between us in the last few months, more than ever before, I think, in our relationship. Would you have any insights on this?
Yes. We would dare say that that's happening to rather a lot of people, perhaps not on exactly the same schedule, but there has been, particularly since last spring, a acceleration of change, an acceleration of the energy, an acceleration of your own inner process of change. Further, aside from the acceleration, you are working, and all of you have been working on root issues. First chakra, second chakra, survival, sexuality, third chakra, power, dependency. These matters, earth-shaking matters, matters that can turn you inside out. You are growing rapidly, changing rapidly, but you're not changing at exactly the same pace, and you are together at this point so that you may learn from each other, so that the abrasion that you feel says, wait, take a look over here, something to deal with. So it's not going to be a mutual cheerleading session in relationships over that period of time and even on into this period of time. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. The relationships that are mutually committed to this process of growth and transformation are finding, through the many, many small shifts taking place, a new footing for the relationship. Because greater honesty, greater clarity, greater communication, greater unity is being achieved. And that's throwing out a lot of old ways of protecting yourself, old ways of greasing the wheels of the relationship, where you used to swallow things that you can't swallow anymore. And so naturally, there's going to be some abrasion, and some relationships will crack up as a result of it. But at this stage, most of you who are now involved in relationships of some duration are fine-tuning. And the commitment will be affirmed as a result of this, admittedly, sometimes painful part of the process. But we would say that by mid-fall, as a new release of Christ energy takes place, there will be a greater harmony in this relationship. Yes?
Plautus, would you comment on the prevalence of violence in entertainment, particularly with children and young people?
Yes. Well, we can isolate upon that, but it's really one symptom, one example of the acceleration of terror, of the powers of darkness, the powers of fear. We mentioned nightmares earlier. Well, if you look at the many of the films that are most popular, particularly with young people, many of them are literally based upon nightmares, upon the subconscious, upon the deep subconscious, upon the fears that rattle around at the bottom of the barrel, and that are fears not of the rationality, you see, but of the entity. These are the iceberg, the part of the iceberg that's beneath the surface. Don't look at this as entirely negative. While it is certainly an example of the proliferation of the energy of fear, it also serves a beneficial task. And that is by bringing these universal, irrational fears to the surface, dealing with them, usually in groups, is not in fact creating a hardness and a toughness, but is allowing these fears to be released. And now, that's not universally true. Some people who are not or are not yet a part of this evolutionary leap will indeed receive only the negative aspect of that kind of experience, not its positive developments. And that fear exposure will add itself to their own storehouse of fear. because you are seeing in every area of human life a deep division growing, parting like the Red Sea. It is the stretching, the polarization that creates by its inevitable tension the break into wholeness, the splitting of the earth, the splitting of reality, the forking of the human road. So you're going to see not less of this, but rather more, but less of it vicarious. Less of it in the films and in the theater and in the music and so forth. More of it on the actual human stage. More terrorism, more war. Not the nuclear holocaust that everyone fears, but the escaping of steam, in a sense. The pressure is enormous. And the weak points in the human fabric will explode. The social fabric. And you can pretty much point your fingers to the explosive areas, and you are indeed going to see more and more war, more and more terrorism, more and more examples of fear on the street, in your house, everywhere. But more and more of you are coming to the realization that fear is the bunk, and that it doesn't work unless you believe in it. It doesn't mean that you couldn't physically be killed by some terrorist, no matter how enlightened you are. The physical aspect of yourself is very fragile indeed and can be killed. But once you recognize the power of love, once you realize and recognize that you are eternal, and that the journey that you are on, the journey of enlightenment, creates such a different sensibility that you cannot and will not be adversely touched by the thrashings of the great beast of fear in its death throes. Yes. We would like now to thank you all for listening to this message, and we will turn this program back to the art of Hiram Titus.